We're on. We're good.
Okay. All right. Welcome to the panel, Batgirls. We are making history by participating in Comic-Con's at-home convention. My name is Dr. Drea Letamendi. My pronouns are her and hers, and I'm a psychologist at UCLA and consultant for WB and DC. As we come together virtually, I want to acknowledge that this is a time of social uprising and social change. It is a time of strain and exhaustion amidst a health pandemic, and it's also a time of tremendous emotional stress as we battle feelings of uncertainty, grief, and loss. Here, we are coming together to celebrate storytelling as a force of social and psychological influence, and I am thrilled to be a part of a group bringing something uplifting to the universe right now. Odds are, when most people hear the name Batgirl, the first character to come to mind is Barbara Gordon, Commissioner Gordon's daughter. First appearing in 1967, she's been a comic mainstay, first as Batgirl, and then of course as Oracle. But as tradition in the Bat family, when things happen, the cowl can be passed from hero to hero, from Stephanie Brown to Cassandra Cain to the Batgirls, each having wildly different takes on the role of a Caped Crusader. I'm pleased to join this panel of writers and creators who have brought these different iconic versions of Batgirl to life in a celebration of what makes them different and what makes them Batgirl in her own light outside of the shadow of Batman. I'd like everyone to please introduce themselves, who their Batgirl is, and why they love Batgirl.
So, hi, my name is Cecil Castellucci. I write young adult novels and comics. For DC Comics, I've done Shade the Changing Girl and The Female Furies, and I am the current writer of Batgirl, Barbara Gordon Batgirl. I love Barbara Gordon and Batgirl, probably because she was, when I was a young girl and saw her on the television show, the Adam West television show, she was the girl. And it was just so exciting to like see a girl that I could relate to and be a hero with. But one of the things that I think is so extraordinary about Barbara Gordon Batgirl is her resilience. I feel like in the Batgirl family, she's one of the, probably the only one, not the Batgirl, but Bat family, who actually like goes to therapy, tries to figure out her stuff, like, tries to deal with issues as they come up and has a great ability for growth and change. And so that's what I love about Barbara Gordon Batgirl.
I'm Sarah Kuhn. I write novels and comic books. I write the Heroine Complex series, which is a series of books about Asian American superheroines. I also wrote audiobook original for Star Wars called Dr. Aphra, which is about Dr. Aphra, who is the most amazing character in Star Wars. If you don't know her, please look her up. And as far as Batgirl, I wrote the graphic novel Shadow of the Batgirl with the amazing artist Nicole Gu. It is about Cassandra Cain. And I love Cassandra Cain because, one, she's the Asian Batgirl. I remember when she was first introduced and she ended up getting her solo series and she was the Batgirl. It actually blew my mind a little bit. And beyond that, I mean, I really love her because she is a character who has sort of been given all the tools to be a supervillain. She was raised by her supervillain father, David Kane, to be a living weapon and to basically be nothing else. She wasn't given language. She doesn't really know how to speak or read or write. And she's sort of, again, been trained to be this living weapon. And then she ends up choosing to pursue a path of superheroing instead. And there is something about that choice that I have always found really powerful and that I really loved being able to sort of reinterpret for young adults, because I think that message is something that's very powerful for them as well.
Fantastic. Hi, I'm Nancy Q. I am a television writer, and I was writing on the CW's Batwoman season 1, and I'll be continuing on to Batwoman season 2 starting up shortly. And my Bat character is Kate Kane's Batwoman. And what I love about her the most, I mean, obviously she is queer for anybody who doesn't know, but she's somebody who lives her life so unapologetically out loud. you know, that she's not afraid to be who she wants to be, like consequences, you know, disregarding all the consequences. And I feel like, especially bringing the story, translating it to TV, and hopefully exposing it to, you know, maybe a different audience, being able to tell the story of a queer superhero lead just saving the day and being her own person is something that I, as a queer person, would have wanted to see as a kid, you know, like somebody just being that representation and somebody just being so unapologetically themselves. And I think that that's one of my favorite things about Kane.
I think we have a pattern developing in all of our Batgirl things. Bryan Q Miller, he, him, and Stephanie Brown was my Batgirl for a bit, and she is resilient. And gosh, she gets to a point where she is unapologetic. So I feel like she's got bits and pieces of the whole that's maybe part of the hand-me-downs of the legacy as it goes. But also, I think what I love about her so much is she, in general, kind of got thrown away by continuity, and continuity just kind of screwed her over a little bit. And so her becoming aware that that's not okay, and I have value, and even if I'm different from the rest of the Bat family, I'm going to do my thing to make Gotham a better place for how I see it. So I think kind of that positivity and that resilience is what I love so much about her. And I write TV and comic books. Sorry, I read that part.
Hi, I'm Marieke Nijkamp. I'm the author of various YA books, and since this year also the writer of the Oracle Code, one of DC's YA titles, featuring a teen Barbara Gordon as Oracle. So no Batgirls here. Actually, no Batgirls in the book at all, which is something apparently a lot of people hated, but definitely Oracle. And that's also who my favorite Bat person is. For many reasons, but primarily as a young disabled teen, I lived a lot of my life on the internet, my social life in any case, and having a superhero who also navigates disability and navigates like ways to be a hero online just entirely resonated with me when I first discovered her. And I basically wrote her in the Oracle Code as a sort of homage to disabled teens everywhere because of resilience, which is definitely going to be a key word here, but also that sense of recognition and seeing yourself represented, because that's so important. Also, my pronouns are completely optional. I am agender. Call me whatever you like.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. I do have a question about resilience, so I'm going to pin that for now. But I did want to start with a more general question for everybody. How do you address building this character's persona, whether we're talking about Barbara Gordon or Batgirl? How do you create your persona that isn't hinged on Batman's narrative? Can you share some strategies as you were creating and writing about kind of like building the icon, building an iconic Batgirl?
I think it's really hard when you're in continuity, because you're always beholden to whatever is happening in the DC universe. And I'm actually curious with Sarah and Marieke, like how freeing it must have been to not be 100% in continuity. And I'm curious with Bryan, because you were in continuity, that like how you dealt with it. For me, I find it to be very difficult, because you're constantly it's like moving into a tide that's very strong, because you're trying to give herself agency to sort of be the center of her own story, but she's always being put into other people's narratives, and you have to account for that. I think I was in 3 events when I first took Batgirl on. They had her in 3 other events going on at the same time, and I had to account for all of it, and it makes it quite difficult. So I tried to really focus on her heart and her emotional growth, because I felt like that was one of the things that, with the resilience thing, that sort of brings her along to her core self. for Barbara Gordon?
Yeah. Oh, and I think I forgot my pronouns in my intro. She, her, hers. Yes, that is interesting because I felt like at the beginning, developing the Cassandra book and even just developing the pitch, I had kind of the opposite problem where I was such a huge fan of that character, and I knew she had, well, I didn't actually know the scope of this, but I knew she had some very big fans as well. And she, like Stephanie Brown, had also been kind of missing, like had kind of been on and off missing for a while from main continuity. So I knew that for me, it was going to mean a lot to not bring her back to main continuity, but kind of give her a spotlight. And so initially, I think I was trying to be just really, really faithful to what had been done and trying not to sort of step on that. And kind of like a lot of the sort of encouragement I got from editors was, you actually don't need to worry about that. This is for a new audience. There shouldn't be any barriers. Like, you can have a lot of freedom to imagine this character as you want to, as long as you stay true to kind of what the core of her is. And then kind of like making her into like a bat person was interesting for us because I was talking with, Nicole, the artist, and Sarah Miller, our wonderful editor, after we had kind of gone through like the first pass of the book. And I was like, I don't think Batman exists in our universe. Like, these are all the DCYA books are like separate universes from each other, so they don't kind of have to be beholden to each other. And I was like, I don't think Batman exists because like, if he did, one, there's like a crime wave happening now that no one's really doing anything about. So I feel like it kind of says that, he's bad at his job. Like, what is he doing? But also for me, it kind of became an empowering thing that these two women were Batgirl, and it wasn't kind of inspired by a man. And so like, I remember we came up with something for, because we also have Barbara Gordon as Oracle in our book. She is basically Cassandra's mentor, even though Cassandra doesn't always know that she was Batgirl in her former life. So we came up with kind of a thing where it was like, okay, if Barbara Gordon was like the first and only bat person in this Gotham City, why did she pick bats? Like, why like, her brainstorm? So we kind of made a thing where it's like Nicole, the artist, put all these great things in kind of the background where we had like flashbacks with her mom, and they both like making gadgets, and you can see that like a lot of the gadgets are kind of shaped like bats, or they're like little batarangs or whatever. I think Nicole put a poster on her wall that was like the Aquabats or something. Like, it was like, see, she always had an affinity for bats, and like things that like her sort of taking persona was actually kind of a tribute to her mom and like the special bond that they shared. And then as far as Cassandra, I really wanted to make it something where she has kind of this hero worship of this Batgirl, this larger than life figure. And so her first instinct is, I need to find Batgirl to basically come save me, to come like make everything better. And what she has to realize, of course, is that she is worthy of saving herself. She's worthy of being a hero. She's worthy of this mantle that she idolizes so much. And for me, I felt like that was like, hopefully kind of a shout out to all, especially young kids of color, especially girls of color who do not see themselves as much as superheroes, to say like, you are Batgirl, like you are worthy of being Batgirl. And like I have had to go through a journey to think I'm worthy of writing Batgirl, like you can go through your own journey, and like Cassandra, you can come out and you can be this awesome Batgirl that's a little bit different from the Batgirl that maybe you idolize, but is still Batgirl nonetheless.
So Batman does exist in the Oracle Code, which is to say he exists as a picture on playing cards, which was designed by my fantastic artist, Manuel Pretano, who threw in lots of like little winks and nudges towards the broader universe. But he doesn't show up in the book at all because most of the story is about Barbara and her finding her way back to herself, basically. And one of the ways in which I approached the story or approached her character was by figuring out what the elements were that I related to when I first read Barbara as Oracle. when I read her as Batgirl, but specifically when I read her as Oracle. And obviously resilience is a big thing there, but there's elements of her personality, her curiosity, her loyalty to the people around her. Those were the things I wanted to keep in reimagining this character. And she starts off as a bit of a wink to Batgirl on the rooftops of Gotham, hacking with her best friend and keeping an eye out everything that's happening, keeping an eye out for her father because she always worries about him. And there's this element of, I love being on top of the world. I'd love to be able to fly. I just want to see the world as this gigantic puzzle and solve it all. So that was sort of my slight nudge to Batgirl. This idea that maybe this Barbara could have been Batgirl too, but then she ends up in a situation where she's shot and becomes paralyzed and has to adapt to life in a wheelchair. And there are a lot of things I love about Oracle as a character, and there were a lot of questions I had about, especially those first few months of her as adapting to life in a wheelchair, adapting to this whole new world around her, where one of the things I love most about the Oracle Code is that we were able to play with perspective, because it's such a simple thing. If you're in a wheelchair, the world looks different because the world is made for people at walking height. So there were all those elements that I just really wanted to explore that I don't think Oracle in Continuity really got to delve into. Oracle Born of Hope did it wonderfully, but it's such a small story in the grand scale of things. So I wanted to focus on that sense of discovering yourself, rediscovering yourself, finding the heart of who you are. And to me, there were those elements: the curiosity, the loyalty, the hacking, the problem solving. And that was the thing I always came back to when I was writing it. It's like, this is how I imagine Barbara to be. This is what I take away from all the many years of reading her. And this is what I want her to start out with and sort of kind of come back to, but hopefully with a growth arc as well.
For Steph, continuity-wise, we had the blessing and the curse of Bruce Wayne having just died, ostensibly. So in a way, because that story and where it was going was so need to know and under wraps, it was very hard to even worry about. You couldn't get any information to try and line up with everything else. Like, you just knew that, oh yeah, Tim is angry, and that's it. We would just have colors of things to do. And Cassandra leaves. Why? Because she just does, so your book can exist. So there were a lot of different things where we, the editor at the time, Mike Siglain, and the artist Lee Garbett on the first run, we were able to, I think, because we were operating in that vacuum, it was like an ignorance is bliss kind of thing. So we were able to kind of focus more on not just Steph's journey, but on what Barbara was going through, because she had just come off of an arc where what's his face? Oh my God, Calculator tried to take like her Oracle identity away from her, and she got mad about just her condition and her inability to fight back kind of without computers, which wasn't really an inability, but she got some anger kind of that came out of that. And we also had kind of this blessing of Wendy from the Wonder Twins being forced into the book. And at first I was like, wow, we're really all in on Barbara. Like, there was a lot of, to the perspective thing, there were a lot of, okay, well, we have two wheelchair characters in the show, in the book. How do we deal with that? How do we make stories that can help kind of showcase that? And so it was kind of triangulating, Steph's role in her own life and Barbara's life, Barbara's role in her life, and then how they both eventually kind of became a part of Wendy's life. This kind of Gilmore-y, I help you, you help me grow relationship between Steph and Babs, that then when continuity did finally creep in, and toys were taken away all of a sudden, when continuity had a purpose again, Oracle had to go away because stuff was happening over in Gail's book. The tone that was, the tone was required to shift a little bit in our book. And so we were able to at least try and focus a bit more on filling and fleshing Wendy out, which was exciting, without repeating the exact same journey Barbara had been on. So it was, in a way, you know, part of the legacy story with the Resilience 2, it was Babs giving the gift of free to be you, but people care about you, so don't get hurt. Responsibly be yourself. Steph got to pass on to Wendy as she kind of brought her into the fold. So it was, continuity wasn't that big a deal until the very end for us, but we at least had that breathing room at the top to really get a solid relationship built between Steph and Babs, so that we didn't, once continuity came back in, we already had a good kind of footing, I think. So we were able to not coast emotionally a little bit towards the end, but we could meet more of the demands of continuity without sacrificing character.
For I think I forgot my pronouns in the intro. She, hers. And for the TV show, you know, I'm a writer on the show. I didn't create the show. Our fabulous showrunner and creator Caroline Dries is the captain of our ship. And I'm not sure exactly whether it was her choice or DC's choice, but in our show, Batman hasn't been seen in Gotham for several years. He's disappeared. We don't know where he is. And so while his specter looms over the show, it gave our show the ability to have a little bit of breathing room to really let Kate step into that role and discover who she was in relation to the suit. And for a lot of the Arrowverse shows, like, they function in their own timeline, but the TV shows function differently than the DC movie universe. So for us, it was always about framing how Kate discovers this journey into stepping into the suit. And her background on the show is that she's always wanted to be somebody who protected people. She always wanted to follow in the footsteps of her father, who was a soldier, and he always wanted to protect her because he lost his younger daughter. She lost her twin sister, Elizabeth, at a young age. And so when she comes back to Gotham, it discovers that her cousin Bruce, you know, was the occupant of the suit. It frames her mind into how she can save the city and herself. And for us, we always play the notion that Bruce is a figure in her life, and she knows what he's done, and she knows what Batman means. But it's how she takes it and frames it for herself. So, for instance, even taking on the suit, it was a sign of trying to show her sister that, you know, like, she can save her. And then gradually she comes to realize that Gotham has been missing the hope that Batman brings. And so that she realizes by stepping into the mantle of the Bat that she can give the hope to Gotham. So we take a lot of, you know, sort of what we take Batman to represent and hopefully inspire, but try to frame it through Kate's journey and sort of how she reinterprets that on her own particular hero journey.
So it's not always about the lens of Batman, which I think is, you know, a tremendous evolution of characters that, you know, like Batgirl, who emerged in the 60s and really, really demonstrated in her own right her level of independence and resilience as a character. We've talked about resilience a few times, so I do want to ask for folks to delve into that a little bit more. When we say resilience, here we're referring to psychological resilience, which is our ability to mentally and emotionally cope with hardships. It's not something that you just have. You have to experience hardship and adversity to be resilient. And there's always some growth and learning that comes from that adversity. It's our ability to access our internal capacities as well as know when to ask for help, which I'm hearing in these narratives. This is something that that Batgirl and Batwoman, this is something they do. When I talk about resilience, I refer to the C's: competence, creativity, confidence, character, coping, and control. So I want to hear from folks as I say those dynamics. Can you talk about your Batgirl or Batwoman's resilience across those dimensions?
I don't remember all the C's. I should have written down the C's.
Yeah.
I'll type them in the chat.
Thank you.
Well, Barbara Gordon, the Batgirl that I am dealing with, she both was Batgirl and then was Oracle and then is Batgirl again. And that's a very a very particular dynamic. And I was tasked when I first came in to have her enemy be a robot of Oracle, the Oracle robot. And that's a whole other level. And I think that her ability to have confidence in who she is, and that machine couldn't take away that her Oracle, that is like a big part of who she is. Because what I think is great about Barbara Gordon, especially in the being Batgirl, being Oracle, and then being Batgirl again, is that she has to fold in all of those realities into who she is, and they're all true, and they've all added to her understanding and her empathy towards the world. And I think that's how she copes with like the things that Bryan was saying about Stephanie. I think that's how she is able to sort of say, be yourself responsibly, because there are, limitations to what you can do, but there are also things that you can do when you have limitations, and I think that that's something that she sort of gives to all of the people. I also didn't say my pronouns. They are she, her, just FYI. So does that cover some of the C's? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. And you can deviate from my characterization. It's kind of a way for us to think about resilience in like a multi-dimensional, I guess, process, if we're kind of trying to tap into the different ways in which she demonstrates her.
I think maybe like taking that as a jumping off point, because obviously that particular journey of Barbara from Batgirl to Oracle and then in continuity back again, it's also the journey from hacker to Oracle is sort of the main journey of the Oracle code, and she doesn't deal well with it throughout most of the book. All of those C's, like the only thing that she can sort of cling to is character. She isn't coping, she doesn't have control, she's lost all sense of competence and creativity, and as such has lost any sense of self-confidence. She's angry, she's hurt, she is lashing out at people, she's lashing out at her father, because she doesn't know who she is anymore. And I wanted to show that because I think it's an important part of the whole process, like especially for people who acquire disability. I've been disabled my entire life, but I have chronic illnesses that flare and things that I'm losing as time progresses. And there's always this almost mourning period, and there's this going through all the stages of grief, and that's something that Babs is doing in the Oracle code. And I wanted to show her as imperfect as she is at that point, because I think it's such a human reaction to it. And then slowly, at first through that sense of character, and she still has that curiosity I just mentioned. So when she sees that things are amiss in the Arkham Center of Independence, where she goes to, because as we all know, it's sensible to send your kids to places with Arkham in the name. But she sees that things are amiss there, so that triggers that sense of curiosity she has. And slowly, through trying to figure out what's happening, trying to connect with the people around her, who there are several other disabled teens in the center who refuse to let her give up on herself. They basically tell her, we're going to be your friends now and you have to deal with that. And that slowly helps her build up a sense of confidence again. She starts learning how to handle her wheelchair. So there's this sense of I'm getting in control of the world a little bit more again. So there's the entire process of going from I have no idea what's going on and who I am anymore to finding that resilience, I think is probably the main point of the Oracle code. And I love those 6 C's because I think that they're so incredibly poignant to this is who we are, and these are various ways in which we can show resilience. And even if some of them are missing at any given point in time, by focusing on the other ones, we can reach for the ones that sort of feel too far away at this, like right now or this point in time.
I love the way you describe that, Marieke. That's so beautiful. I love your take on Oracle so much. I think that just comes through more every time I hear you talk about it. But Drea, one thing I was really struck by what you said was sort of like physical resilience versus sort of the C's, like the mental or emotional resilience. And I love that resilience is kind of what binds all these bat people together. And so I think like Cassandra is going through sort of an extreme version of that, where she's been raised to really only think that physical resilience is kind of the only thing. It's the only important thing. It's the only important kind of resilience. If you get knocked down, you just get up again and you don't act like it hurt you. And, you know, as an Asian American person, I feel like the way I was raised was kind of like, if you have a feeling and it's a bad feeling, you don't have that feeling. You just kind of shove it down and you overcome it. You toughen up and you overcome it. And, you know, that's something that I've spent years in therapy trying to undo. But there's like not sometimes in what I'm describing, but also in Cassandra's world, there's not really room to process anything. There's not room to have that trauma and sit with it and sort of go through what these feelings are. So one of the things I really wanted to show in our book was that, you know, she's sort of being given the tools to have space for that trauma, to process the trauma, to sort of like have people who in your life who are kind to you no matter what. And so like one of the lines that a lot of people like from the book is she has this mentor named Jackie, who's like her other mentor, who's not Barbara, who's a classic Asian auntie. She like owns a noodle shop and she wears all these clashing patterns and like the Adidas slides with socks. And she's always trying to feed you too much and like tell you how to live your life. But she's also very kind, and she is the person who kind of gives Cassandra space to process this. And at one point she says to her, it's okay to not be okay. And that was certainly a revelation for me. And it's definitely a revelation for Cassandra, because she has never been told, you can have this feeling, you can be hurt. It's okay if you're hurt by this. It's okay if you need space to process it. It's okay if you don't just get up again and pretend like you're okay when you're obviously not. So that was something that was really important for me to kind of incorporate in there as far as the idea of resiliency. And then one thing I really love is that the sort of the sea of creativity comes in later, because Cassandra has never been given sort of any choices. She has never been able to pick her clothes, her hair, she doesn't have any friends. She doesn't really have family except for the father who's abused her. So there is a point later where, you know, she's basically homeless. She's living at the Gotham Library and she has to like make new outfits. So she keeps going to the Lost and Found and like just pulling out what's in there and like putting it on. And at first she's not necessarily putting any thought into it, but as the book progresses, we see her like kind of figuring out what her creativity is in that, like what she likes to wear, like how she likes to look, the way she likes to kind of present, you know, why a pair of cool sneakers makes her feel really awesome. So that by the end, she kind of has the creative tools to like make her own Batgirl costume. And that was kind of like an evolution that I really like to show as well.
For Steph with that, I'm sorry, Nancy, did you want to go?
No, you go first.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it's my room Zoom protocol. You said a word. I'm like, no, you go. It's good. With Steph, like to the C's of it, she, I think, coming into when she stepped into the cowl, she had experienced a severe lack of control, and she was very impulsive, kind of coming. And it resulted in, a gang war that destroyed Gotham, and then she wound up ostensibly dead and living in Africa for a period of time. So when she came back in, you know, her journey was all kind of, is she going to give way to that impulsiveness again? Is she going to lose control again? And I think what she had that she didn't, which is like the secret seventh C, I guess, she had community in hers. Like she had Barbara, and she had, even though Cassandra wasn't there with her, she had Cassandra kind of as a friend and a role model for her, for what a Batgirl kind of could and should be. And to a lesser extent, the rest of the Bat family, because especially when Bruce came back, it wasn't super impactful on how she did her business. It just suddenly she had a chaperone. But with how she approached everything, it was that sense of community. And I think for her, her resilience, knowing she could rely on other people and people were finally watching her back for the first time, because even really as a Robin, Batman wasn't watching her back necessarily, and he didn't really want her as a Robin. So spreading that into how she affected Damian and kind of let him know that it was like Sarah, what you were saying with the, it's okay. It's okay to have feelings, like her trying to impart upon this little assassin monster that, you know, you can be a kid. You don't have to let this take away, you know, your childhood. And, you know, getting little moments with him, and also for kind of her, how the city started to have her back as well, like not through necessarily the older generation, but we tracked her a little bit with this little girl Nell, and kind of the younger generation of citizens who she wasn't an object of fear. Her yellow symbol was a symbol of hope. And so I think and that allowed her to, you know, her confidence to build and her creativity to flourish, and how she approached gadgets and situations differently than everybody else. And she was at her best when she wasn't driving the Batmobile through semi trucks. Like that just wasn't her style. It wasn't. So she was able to be her own hero. And I think kind of in a holistic way, all the C's were better for her.
Something that Sarah said, it's okay to not be okay. Like, I think that's such an important emotional thing for all of us, and for our characters to sort of just admit to themselves and be able to voice out loud. Because I think for Kate, you know, she's born from trauma. You know, in our show, she lost her sister and her mother in a terrible car accident at the hands of Batman and Joker. You know, and so she's always questioned, has she done enough? Could she have saved her sister that day? Like, what could she have done? And so in some ways, her character has been running away from Gotham and away from sort of, you know, like dealing with that stuff. And in our pilot, bringing her back to Gotham and realizing that her sister's alive, it really forces Kate to sort of, it almost lose control in a way of actually having to finally deal with this stuff that she has repressed and run away from and just not faced head on. And I think, you know, part of the resilience she learns is the confidence that she has is it's not enough to just survive something. You know, like a lot of our characters are born from these traumatic moments or these incidents that have very lasting scarring emotional, you know, effects on them. But, you know, for Kate, part of that resilience is in learning how to live. You know what I mean? Like, surviving isn't enough. You have to live and be confident enough to step into your own persona. And I think for us and for Kate, you know, having her take on the mantle of the Bat and sort of discover not who she wants to be for somebody else, not who she wants to be for her sister, not who she wants to be for her father, but who she wants to be for herself and who she wants to present to the world, has sort of been our journey for Kate, and into stepping into her own. Is just really learning who she is and how she wants to live her life for herself. And in fact, then stepping into the bat suit.
I feel like that's a lot of the same thing for Barbara Gordon as well. You know, like, you know, one thing that's really difficult with Batgirl is that she doesn't have her own rogues gallery, you know, and, you know, Barbara doesn't have, you know, they're mostly just Batman's villains. And so I think that, like, you know, trying for her to try to figure out who she is, Barbara, you know, with all of these different identities that she has, hacker, librarian, you know, daughter, hero, lover, you know, all of these sort of different parts of her. And that she a Congress, you know, legacy of Batgirl Barbara Gordon is that she basically Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, like in her original run, she becomes America's youngest congresswoman. So, you know, all of these sort of identities that kind of blend together, it's exactly the same as what you're talking about with Batwoman, where and I think it's probably the same for the others, where they're just trying to sort of forge forward and figure out your own identity.
I love that what all of you are creating as it relates to trauma is that these narratives we're no longer centering the narrative around the victimization and like where that came from, the figure or the person that kind of you know, created the trauma, that we're talking about kind of the non-linear journey that happens afterwards, this rediscovery, this growth. We're bearing witness as readers to what this kind of healing and self-discovery process is, which I, you know, as a psychologist, I have to say is like really what is newer to female characters, I think, you know, in comics. Marieke, I have a specific question for you. I was excited to learn that you were talking about treatment and rehabilitation and centers that are kind of like bringing youth together to work on therapy and all sorts of things. How, for writers who want to, you know, this is hard to do, right? To kind of build this story and talk about this. For other writers who are interested in these depictions, how, you know, what was your process and what do you recommend as far as guiding, you know, your principles in creating that landscape?
I mean, I definitely cheated a bit in the sense that I lived in the rehabilitation center when I was 14, 15. So a lot of those experiences that Barbara was going through were experiences that I went through. Finding yourself in an entirely new environment, suddenly dealing with all these kinds of therapy, hating everything that happens around you and to you, and suddenly forcibly making friends with everyone. A lot of that anger and sense of displacement were things that I experienced when I was living there, so I could bring that into the story. But I think in general, one of the things that I would love to see writers do as they approach disabled characters, stories of rehabilitation, stories of trauma, is listen to people who experienced it. There are many memoirs out there from disabled writers talking about their own experiences with disability, with trauma, with types of therapy. And generally speaking, like obviously you can also look at like the medical scientific stuff, all of which is incredibly important. But that's a very specific lens to filter your story through. And it's also a lens that isn't necessarily unproblematic in terms of like the medical side on the medical model on one side, and disability rights and social model of disability on the other side. So I think it's super important to listen to people who have experienced this. If you can, beyond obviously reading memoirs and watching documentaries and all of that stuff, if you can reach out and talk to people, and when I can, I'm always happy to talk to people about my own experience, especially reach out to younger disabled writers to see if I can help them on their way. But I think you can only get so far in writing someone else's reality and perspective if you haven't lived it. And this is obviously not something that only holds true for disability, but holds true for all kinds of marginalizations. And to get that extra mile, you have to not just do the research, but you have to know the people. You have to be cognizant of the fact that if you look around yourself, are there disabled people in your environment? Statistically speaking, yes, but are you aware of it? Is it something that you are able to talk about? Is it something that you have the language to talk about? All those things filter into being able to create a convincing world, a convincing rehabilitation center, a convincing worldview. And it's usually not the big, and that's one of the reasons why only going for the science is really not that interesting. It's usually not the big like therapeutic theories that are necessarily interesting. It's the small things. It is looking at the world and figuring out that, hey, this world simply isn't built for us. It's finding ways to play biped slalom, which is one of the things that the wheelchair users in my book are doing, like running around people who are ambulatory. So it's figuring out how all those elements influence your worldview and influence the world around you. And once you feel like you have a decent understanding of it, that's probably a good place to start, which is like placing the bar quite high. But I feel like when it comes to writing people's lived experiences, we should settle for nothing less.
I think this is a great note to wrap things up around. I'm going to ask everyone to please let us know, let audiences know where they can find you online. And if you have some project you're working on you'd like folks to know about, please also mention it. So Cecil, we'll start with you.
You can find me, hi Cecil, you can find me online on Twitter at Miss Cecil, and on Instagram at Cecil C Skull, that's my punk name. And well, I'm writing Batgirl, so pick up Batgirl every month. And I'm gonna also give a shout out to my book with Jim Rugg called The Plain Janes, which is about an all-girl guerrilla art group that does, speaking of trauma, that does sort of art attacks to make an attack be something beautiful rather than traumatic. So Plain Janes.
Hi, I'm Sarah Kuhn again, and Shadow of the Batgirl has been out for a few months now. My fourth heroine complex book, Haunted Heroine, should be out by the time this panel comes out, and my Star Wars audiobook original, Dr. Aphra, I think will also have just come out when this panel comes out. And you can find me online at on Twitter. I'm on Twitter way too much. It's Sarah, just my name, Sarah Kuhn, and on Instagram I'm Sarah Kuhn Books because someone took Sarah Kuhn. And if you just want to go to my website, it's heroincomplex.com. That's heroin like super heroin, not like the drug.
I'm Nancy. You can find me. I actually don't know my Twitter handle. Like, even though I'm on Twitter, I had to like look when you at the beginning said like we have to make these announcements at the end. So I think my handle is Nancy_Q spelled K-I-U, but double check that. I think my Instagram is also just my name.
Want.
You may want to verify it.
That's fine. You keep talking. I got it. I follow you. So.
We will be starting up season 2 of Batwoman shortly, or starting to break the stories for it. And in the meantime, I think season 1 DVD is coming out, and you can catch it and stream it on HBO Max, I believe. All 20 episodes that we were able to shoot before the pandemic, and our completed season is on there. And then the writers are all excited to bring everybody season 2, and we hope you guys all tune in.
It is Nancy _Q. And, yeah, it's just at Nancy_Q. So you can find me there for all of my things. At Bryan Q Miller. I'm in the room for the 2nd season of Motherland Fort Salem on Freeform, and am working also on one of the 2 He-Man animated cartoons for Netflix. So that those should both be out at some point in the indeterminate future in the next 2 years, probably. So that's what I'm up to.
You can definitely also find me on Twitter. Like Sarah, I spend way too much time on Twitter. It's a problem. My Twitter handle is MARIEKEYN. You can get the Oracle Code, which is written by me and art by Manuel Presano. It's been out since March. I also have a YA novel coming out this year, which is called Even If We Break. It's One of Us is Lying meets Dungeons and Dragons. So it's basically my wanting to write a thriller with a lot of RPG elements because I'm a nerd. Surprising absolutely no one. And then I'm also writing, which just got announced, so I'm really thrilled I get to talk about it. I'm writing a Goosebumps miniseries comics. So that's coming out starting September as well, which means I get to play around in Fever Swamp. So Tween Me is super happy.
Awesome. You can find me online on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is at Arkham Asylum Doc. Maybe the one positive association with Arkham, I hope. But find me there. I talk about psychology and comics. You can also find my work if you are watching or if you're purchasing DVD and Blu-rays from Warner Brothers Home Entertainment Media. You'll find me talking about Arrow, the animated movie Hush, I think Gotham. So all the shows, if you download the featurettes, there I am talking about psychology. usually of the Bat families. So finally, with that, I want to thank Cecil, Sarah, Nancy, Bryan, Marieke. I appreciate your sharing your wisdom with us. I want to thank Comic-Con at Home for welcoming us into your program. I hope everyone continues to stay safe, and please take care of yourselves and each other.
Thank you. Okay, hold on. Stop recording. Stop recording.